Yeah, good evening. So, last session we learned about how we can use material UI. Have you tried any other components you tried working with material UI? Have you practiced other components? Huh? You tried any components which are already we learned? Just I given an overview of button. Huh? Have you tried any another component? Are you facing any issues? Is it clearly working for you? Which component you tried? Card? No interactions things you tried. Interactions means accordion, dialogues. You have to try such things because issues will be in such interactions. Logically handling some interactions. Issues will not be in plain designs. Right? In plain designs, simple components will be there. You have to use them. The issues you will get mostly while designing some complex things. Right? While working with some complex things, you will come across. Huh? So you haven't tried any other components which have interactions, huh? Right? Nobody? Huh? Because if you try, then only we can have some discussion on that, that if you are having any issues or not. Right? You do one thing, you try this. Already I showed you in the components library. You try the components that need some interactions. Like you see, we have dialog boxes now. These are very commonly used, right? These are dialog boxes. It's a basic dialog box. You see, we have a dialog box, a pop-up will come like this. These kind of things you must able to design. These are open and alert dialog like this. Because these contains interactions actually. If you can design like these interactions, then it will be easy for you. Because when developing a complex application, you have to know about, here you see, you have to know about how to create such pop-ups, which are very common in our projects. So you try designing these type of interactions. Then you will get some issues because missing with the events, mismatching the event names, some issues will come. If you can address them, then you are perfect in this. Okay. But majority, all the code is given to you. You just have to, you can even just copy and paste and make changes into it according to your requirement. But first try to understand where the event is written, which function is it is pointing, and how it is invoking that. You need to know all these things. Right? So you try those options. Next, one more important now we have to design one simple third party like Redux and all these we will see. Now we need to create one application to handle such state management and all. Right? To work with the state management, handle state management. So for that, we will create one application and we will build an application and host it on the live deployment so that we can see it live, happening it live, working with live. So for that, first what you need to do is, that means we will create combination of Redux and we will try to deploy and we will see how it works live, right? That means we will first see how we can make our application live. And once we can deploy with complete setup like Redux. You can use cookies, you can use routing, everything we will implement in one application. Already we designed one end-to-end project, right? We designed one end-to-end project. We need to learn how to deploy it first. Then we can see some state management working on that. Why? Because generally, why you need state management? Already I told you one concept. So if anyone asks, what is state management? State management, and why we need state management? State management. What is your answer? What is state management and why we need state management in web applications? What is your answer for this? What is state management and why we need the state management? Are you thinking or waiting for my answer? I am a deadlock situation. You are not responding, I am not responding. Both are waiting for each other. Do I need to wait for your answer? I'm storing data. That is what I asked. Why you need a state management? Ali, storing data and share across application, that is good. But I am asking, why you need state management for that? Without state management, can't you do it? Understood my question? Why you need state management? Come on, it's very not justifying. You are developing web applications. And if you cannot tell this, then how? You are working with web application means you must first know this thing, that actually why we need state management. What is state management required? To make code generic. No, not that. Pawan says, no, it's not about generic. Actually, this is very basic, right? For thread safety. Thread safety is not a point. No idea. Actually, this is very basic thing, na? Because web applications. So see, you already know that web applications use, it is not about which stage it is. Actually, Ravi Kumar, that's not also about stage. No, it is not about that property drillings and all. No. Okay, let me give you a point. Actually, web applications, generally web application uses HTTP as protocol. Am I right? And HTTP is a stateless protocol. This is primary thing. It is very bad about this that you don't know. That is very basic concept. That means you should know as a web developer. I hope you might have learned this in protocols concept itself, when you started your HTML things, right? Do you know? Have you heard about this point? You heard about this point? Huh? That is the key point, right? HTTP is a stateless protocol. What is meant by stateless protocol? Stateless protocol means it works with the mechanism. It works with the mechanism. What is that mechanism? Go, get, forget. It works with the mechanism go, get, and forget. So go, get, and forget. What does actually this means? Go is nothing but establish connection with server. Establish connection with server. Get means get response. That means get response from server. That means or fetch. Right? You get response from server or fetch some information from server. After that, forget. Forget means disconnect. Disconnect from server. It works with this mechanism. Go, get, forget. That means it can go to the established connection with server, get response from server. After that, it will disconnect from server. HTTP works with this mechanism. That means I will tell you a simple thing actually. That means how it manages, right? Actually, what happens is, suppose you are working with some server. This is some server. And actually, internally, server has a lot of things. I will not go that much in depth about that because that is related to web application architecture. Web application architecture, your technologies server side, they will teach you how Java, how .NET server side applications architecture works. They will tell you about that. Actually, now what happens is we have some 2 pages here. That means we have, like here, we have page 1. So, and we have page 2. Now what happens is, clients make a request for the first page. Then what will happen is, this first page is loaded into the server. First page is loaded into the server. That means this is the request for first page. It is loaded into server. This page have a life cycle. If it is not a page, you have a component, right? Component will have a life cycle. After this page, that means actually for this page, some memory is allocated on server. And everything happens in that memory. Once this page is finished, that means from one page 1, to you are moving page 2. Then what happens? Whatever memory allocated for page 1, it is deleted. That means once the page finished using, it's cleaned up, delete everything. All the traces about the page, or in your terms, your component, they are cleaned up. They are deleted. All the information is removed, deleted. Now what happens when the second page goes? Then memory is allocated for that page. And what happened in page 1, it is completely unknown to page 2. So this is the problem with HTTP. Web server is HTTP server. Your web servers are HTTP servers. Web server is a HTTP server. And this works with the mechanism go, get, and forget. That means establish connection with the server. get response from the server, and after that, remove all the traces, clean up. So this is the problem with HTTP. That means HTTP, web application uses HTTP, or you can also say it uses HTTPS. HTTPS is a secured protocol. I hope you know that HTTPS is more secured over HTTP, right? It can encode the data. It can encode the data. So stateless nature of HTTP protocol, that means HTTP server, HTTP protocol is good. Stateless nature of HTTP protocol is good. Why it is good? As memory is well managed. As memory is well managed. But it is a drawback. So it is a drawback. It is a drawback for application. It is a drawback for application. Why it is drawback? As it cannot remember information between requests. Understood? It cannot remember information between requests. Stateless nature of HTTP is good for server. Why it is good for server? So as memory is well managed, after it is finished, it will clean up the memory. That means it will not have burden on memory. It will not have burden on memory. But it is a drawback for application. Why? Because it cannot remember information between requests. Between requests, it cannot remember information. Then how to solve this problem? Hence state management. So hence web application uses various state management techniques. Web application uses various state management techniques. So what will these techniques help the application? So state management techniques will help the application to store and manage the values across requests. So that means web application uses various state management techniques. Out of that, some you already know. Actually, state management techniques, there are so many state management techniques. Actually, hidden input is also a state management technique. Hidden input is also a state management technique. I will show you the point. I will tell you. Hidden input is also a state management technique. Cookies comes under state management technique. We used cookies as a state management technique. You have session states. We have like application states. You will hear about local storage. Local storage is very common in JavaScript based applications. In JavaScript based applications, you can use local storage. So you can use context memory. You can also use which one? Query string. We can also use query string. This all comes under state management techniques. If you remembered, out of these, we used query string. Query string means route parameters. No? So how you transported data from one page, one component to another. We passed data in URL. From URL, we collected the data in another component and we used it. That means we worked with route parameters. We worked with the query string. That means technically we used context memory. Already I told you, na? We used the context hook. Na? You remember that? We used use context hook. We used that use context hook. So it is a context memory. We used cookies. So we have session application states maintained in different technologies. So hidden also input state actually. For example, see here. Suppose means I will tell you some situations actually. Suppose I'm giving one simple option here. I will tell you the situations where you need such data. Let's add a demo.html file, roughly this one. Now here I will just keep some doc type HTML and HTML, okay, and just head and just title some state. Just roughly I'm configuring the body. And here what I'm doing is I'm using a data list, data term, and here we have name and data definition. Actually input type is equal to text. Okay. Now what I have to do is actually I need to update. I have a button called update. Just I will give an option here. I have an update here. You see this is update. Now usually to update the name, that means they have some name to display. I will just use a value as John, and I am making some changes into it. After that I click on update. This must be updated into database. Okay, this must be updated into database. Now in order to update into database, as per, suppose we are not using MongoDB. Suppose we are, you may be using MongoDB or any other database. In other databases, usually you have a primary key, am I right? That means every user have a user ID. We have to update based on user ID. User ID. That means actually what will be the command? So update. So table, you will have fields, you will have values, values where user ID is matching with any user ID. Actually, in order to update your name, it needs an user ID. But you are not sending user ID. If you are not sending user ID, how it will update? I want to send user ID. If I want to send user ID, then I am designing here a data term user ID. And here I will give a data definition. And you see input type is equal to text and value is equal to some John underscore NIT. That is the user ID. But I don't want this user ID to be modified. If I don't want this user ID to be modified. If I don't want this user ID to be modified, then you can say that you can keep read only, am I right? If you keep as read only, that means you cannot modify. You cannot modify. I don't want to show it at all. I don't want to show the user ID. User ID, he should not see it. Right? In that case, what we do, we will remove this. If you remove this, there is no user ID. But without sending user ID, it cannot update. That means you should not show, but it should be sent. Understood the situation? So what is problem if you give as read only? Read only cannot update. Understood? Read only cannot update. So you need to send a value, but it should not display. Then generally what you do in web technologies, what we do is we will actually send an input type as hidden, input type hidden. In this input type hidden, we will have a value. That value is that user ID, John NIT. And this is name. This is the name. Name is what? So user ID. This is the name user ID. And this is the name as user name. And actually this entire is present in a form. I will give in a form. Now, what happens here is user ID is not shown. I am making some changes in the name and I click on update, then you can see user ID is also sent. User ID is sent. So, but it is never shown in the page. So lot of values are sent in the background which are never shown to you. And that is actually managed by using hidden. This is called hidden state. This is called hidden state. It is a very common technique in web technologies. That means without sending ID, it cannot update. And I don't want to show this to users because I use some token to send in details. And the token user should not see. And without ID, you cannot update. Without ID, you cannot update. Then generally what we do, we use this technique and already we know that is what actually, so that is hidden state actually, hidden state. And how do you define that hidden state? Just example I am giving. This is just rough example to make you understand that how the values are submitted. So don't think that state management means Redux, because many people are excited about only Redux, right? But state management is not just Redux. We don't need even Redux also now. Why? Because in the current modern, already we learned use reducer now. Already we used use reducer. In the modern React, in the advanced versions of React, we have a reducer. We have a use reducer. Already we used it. External state management is used for handling complex operations. But in the modern React, we don't need that. Already you learned use reducer hook. If you remembered, you learned use reducer hook already. That is actually Redux state. Before that hook, people have to completely depend on Redux. Now we have so many states here. This is hidden state. Hidden state. And I don't need to explain cookies. Already we learned cookies. So cookies, we learned how to store data, how to access data from the cookie and use it. We know context memory. Already we learned use context. We know query string. We learned how to access the route parameters and use them. Local storage is not required because local storage JavaScript uses that local storage, because cookie itself we used as local storage. You can store locally that data in cookies. Application states, session states are there. Application states, session states concept is actually means the concept of application and session is nothing but session state is nothing but, so keep the values. That means it. I will give all of them so that you can have a complete note at one place. Hidden state. Another one is what? Cookies. Cookies are nothing but, so a simple text file. A simple text file that stores client details. So we have two types. We have in memory and we have persistent, right? And in memory is nothing but, in memory cookies are nothing but temporary cookies. That means if you don't give expiry, it will be in memory. If you give expiry, it will be persistent. We already used that, right? And here we have two other options, session state. Session state and application state actually. Session state is nothing but actually it uses single call mechanism. Remember, I am taking some liberty of explaining so many which are not actually learned by any React developer. Remember, these are never general topics in React. These are general topics in web application. Right? These are general topics in web application. Nowhere in React you will come across these general topics. But a React developer, you can't call yourself as a React developer without knowing the web basics, right? Without knowing the web standards, because you are developing a very advanced web application using React, and you don't have awareness on basic web development, then that is poor, right? That is the reason I'm taking some steps forward to make you understand that this is how web application works. But generally, these are not the topics discussed in React-like concepts. People come to React with this kind of knowledge, right? People have to come to React-like technologies with this knowledge, right? Here you have to just learn how to use in React, But many times you people are not aware of all the consequences and scenarios because you are coming from various technologies. That is the reason I'm just explaining some points here additionally, because you need to correctly know where we have to apply the topic that we are going to learn and why we have to apply, why we need this. Because many times when we talk about Redux, people think that it is related to React. React is not related to Redux, or Redux is not related to React. Actually, Redux is just a state management library used in any JavaScript based application. Any JavaScript based application can use this Redux. Why they have to use, that is the point we are learning. Why they have to use for managing state. Why they have to manage state? Because every web application is a stateless application. Every web application is a stateless application. Why it is a stateless application? Because it uses HTTP. These are all related. So single call mechanism means state uses single call mechanism. Single call mechanism is an object is created for every client request. An object is created for every client request, and it is destroyed when client terminates. So it is destroyed when client terminates. That means for every client, an individual object is created. And the lifespan, that means the lifespan of object is from a client login to logout. That is what actually we call as session state. This is session state. That means, for example, so it is not just login to logout. So it is login to logout, or start and end of any transaction. Start and end of any transaction. So that means, for example, you are booking a ticket for a flight or a bus or something. Now, once you selected the seats, and you click next. Once you selected the seats and click next, now your session starts. Understand? Now the session starts. When you choose, the session starts. And how much time actually session persists actually? Generally, the default duration of session is 20 minutes. Default duration of session in HTTP web applications is 20 minutes. It is set to 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes, the session expires. But you can change that, right? In state management, you can do that. You can set session for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, anything. For example, you see, you are doing some ticket booking. Your session starts once you start booking, and they will give you only 5-6 minutes for that booking. Within the 5-6 minutes, you don't complete the transaction, it will show a message, your session ends. Understood? That is session state. Session state means how much time I need to keep this value. That means how much time you need to keep that value. So it can be until he signed out, or it can be until specific duration. specific duration that you can decide. You see that happens in every application. Sometimes even bank applications, if you see bank or any other highly secured applications, what they do, they will end not only session, they will end your, of course, they will end the session and they will log out you. They will end the session and they will log out you. And they will say that your session expired. Please log in again. Bank applications usually do that. So that is single call mechanism. Single call mechanism. Now that is what actually session states. Session state. What is application state? Application state is nothing but application state. It uses singleton mechanism. Singleton mechanism. It uses singleton mechanism. So singleton means an object is created for first request, and same is used across all requests. That means an object is created for first request and same is used across all requests. So that means it ends when application is closed. When application is closed, it will end. This is application state. That means actually it makes the data available across. It makes the data available across. Technically, it is across multiple sessions. Understood? It makes the data available across multiple sessions. That means all sessions can access it. All sessions can use it. So this is actually application state. It uses a singleton mechanism. Actually, single call mechanism means, I will show you here. So for example, we have server. Now what happens here? We have clients. So we have the clients and number of clients. So various number of clients. We have the clients, and we have some resource here. That means we have some resource, and the client have to access that resource. When first client makes a request, an object is created for that request, and through that object he will access that resource. Understood? And this object will automatically ends when the client disconnects. This object ends when the client disconnects. That means what happens when another client connects, then what will happen is another object is created for that client. And through that object, he can access that resource. That means for every client, we have a separate object. This object is independent. This object is independent for this client only. So this object is independent for this client. For every client, an object is created, data is maintained there until client stops, terminates. This is what we call it as, this is called session. This is actually session objects. These are session objects. That means as a web developer, you need to decide how to keep the data. Is it for session or is it for application? So we have session level data, we have application level data, and Redux will provide both. So, and actually 100 to 100% wherever you see Redux, means majority Redux related examples, tutorials all over anywhere, you will find people telling you about application state. Every example is application state. That means at application level, how to provide the data. and how to access and use the data across all components in application. But you have learned session also by using cookies, right? What cookies will do? They will be until sign out. We already saw that. Once sign out, it is end, right? Now, these Redux-like options are used to provide a store which can keep your data across multiple components. That means it is using not at a session level, it is using at application level. That means what is at application level? Actually, you see, session means it ends after this object ends. This is single call mechanism. Understood? This is single call mechanism. Actually, we have another option, singleton. Singleton means what happens? An object is created for first request, and the same object is used by everybody. Understood? Through that, they will access and use the resources. The same object is used by everyone. Object is created for the first request, the same will continue for others. Now, what is the best example for this? It means where you will see this type of concept, session and application. Session and application, where we can see this. For example, observe carefully. Best example I will give you at application level, what it is. Session level, what it is, application level, what it is. Suppose somebody is going live on Facebook. Understood? Somebody going live on Facebook. When anybody going live on Facebook, several people starts joining that live. Understood? That means it will show that how many users are currently watching. Am I right? Watching. How many users are currently watching? Suppose 100 users are currently watching. Now, this is a session. Why? This is a session. Facebook Live is a session. Why? Because once you end the live, right, that count is 0. Am I right? Once you end the live, the count is 0. That means, remember, count is incrementing when new persons are joining. 100, 100, 200, 300, 4. But will it continue forever? It will not continue forever. What will it will be? It will end automatically when your live ends. Understood? This is session state. That means I want to make some users count, and that count should be until the live ends. Understood? I want to start a count. That count should start when live starts, and that count should end when live ends. Until that live ends, the count will be incrementing, storing the previous values. Understood? Continuing the previous. This is session. Okay. Then what is an application level? What is application level? Application level means you can say, suppose you have, you have Facebook post. In Facebook post, so how many people viewed, right? How many people liked? Am I right? Like how many people viewed, how many people liked? So will it end? Will it end? It will not end. When it will start? When it will start? When you uploaded the post. When uploaded the post, the count starts. First person saw. That means you are the first viewer. YouTube videos also. Right? You are the first view. First to view, first to like. They will give that option. After that, likes counts increments. Can you tell when it stops? When Facebook likes will stop. When YouTube likes will stop. Or YouTube views will stop. What is the option for stopping them? What do you say? Until you remove the post. Understood? Huh? That means until that application ends. Even the application end, it is continuing. Right? Until you remove it, right? It will not stop. This is application. That means, and developer should first know where he have to apply application state, where he should apply session states. That means a developer should have an idea, where should I use cookies? Where should I use query string? Where should I use session or application? Where should I use Redux? Is Redux for every purpose? Can it manage sessions also? Can it manage application also? These are the basic things a developer should know, right? A developer should know, right? Technically, that is very important to understand. So blindly, many people just know that React means state management. State management is Redux. That's what they learn, but they don't know that so many consequences are there. Without Redux also, there can be a React application. We can use alternative so many things for managing the application level. Application level. You see here, the concept here is, so suppose we have Redux. Redux official, we will go, this is Redux. And you see, so a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. It is a state container for JavaScript apps. It is a state container for JavaScript apps. That is the point what they tell about Redux. And it is used everywhere. It is used everywhere. So many points are there. So you can see here, you see what it says here. That means it says that you see, centralize your application's state. Understood? Centralizing your application state and logic, enable, these are all other things. What is centralizing the application state? That means it is not talking about session level. It is not talking about session level. It is saying that centralize your application's state. Application state. An application have several sessions again. Right? So what does that means? That means it means that it is going to manage. So you see, it says that application's state changed. That means it is going to track, so when, where, how your application state changes. Right? So technically, this is very important to understand that. So these kind of state containers are not required every time for every application until or unless I need an application state. Obviously, general web application means they have both application states and session states. Session states. Usually they have both of them. That is the reason it's important to understand both. Right? So you need to understand both. So, but here application state is using a singleton mechanism, right? So I hope you got a clarity. What is a session state? What is an application state? And what is cookies? What is hidden? Context memory, already I told you. Query string, already I told you, right? What is context? Context is nothing but, what is context memory? Remember that? What is the context? What is the purpose of use context? What is the purpose of use context? Already we learned. What is context memory? We learned use context hook na? For what purpose we used it? For what purpose we used? Come on, you have to remember all these things. because in the modern React interviews, because this context, these all regular interview questions, because they are new, hooks, React hooks are new. So already we learned this. Context memory is what? Context memory is, that means it is already actually not data across component. That means context is memory allocated for component. So it is made available for components that run within the context. Understood? Within the context of parent. Understood? We discussed that parent and child, not other components outside. Context is not for other components. Context is for the components that run within the context of current. That means already we have a component. So you should not say between components or across component. You should say across or between the components that run within the context of current. I showed you that concept. Already we learned now. Use context. How use context works? That means you have the parent, right? In this parent, for this parent, this is parent, right? For this parent, a context memory is created. In this context memory, what we do? In this context memory, there will be another child. Am I right? We make this available to the child. Understood? That is what we have learned about use context. Use context is used for that, right? Already we learned with one good example also. How to transport data from parent to child. We saw that. Right? How the context works. We discussed it, right? We used that use context. That means from sign in, what example we have seen. So it is not across multiple components. It is only for the components which are running within the context of parent, not for other components. If you say between components, it's wrong. It is not between components, it is across the components which are running within the context of current component. That is important to tell, right? These are all very important. The context options are important, right? That is what actually context memory. This is another concept, how the context works. And query string is used for query string, so route parameters, it is nothing but it is used to transport data across requests. What it will do, it appends data in URL. Am I right? It appends the data in URL, right? So these are all the options. That means state management means a lot of things are involved. That means as a developer, first you should know your situation. As per the situation, you have to manage the states. You have to work with sessions. You have to work with cookies. You have to work with applications. So what is this Redux now? The Redux is nothing but what is the key concept of Redux? It is a state container. Understood? It is a state container for what kind of options? JavaScript apps. It is used in React, Angular, Vue. You can use in Ember. Everywhere you can use this. We can use everywhere. JavaScript apps. That means actually it is a centralized. Centralized store for application state. Understood? It is a centralized store for application state. What is meant by application state? I told you, right? It is a centralized store for application state. What is the meaning of that? That means it allows to access and use data from any component. Am I right? It keeps the data in a centralized application state so that any component can access and use it. That means you can simply say that it is application level, right? It is application level. That is what actually the Redux point is. So that is what they say actually. That means, so predictable state container means, what is meant by predictable state container? Why it is a predictable state container? Any specific reason for that? Any idea? Predictable state container. It's nothing technically complex. Actually, it indicates that it exactly knows when and where to provide the data. That means what is the range, what is the scope, so who can access. These limits are exactly known. That means a predictable state container means what? It exactly knows what it is doing. That means it's not like we don't know the range from where it is accessed, where it is made available. That means, so for example, you see you have cookies. Cookies are not predictable. Why? Cookies are not predictable. You can store data in a cookie, but it is not predictable. Why? Because you may say cookies will expire after 4 days, but it may be deleted in between any time. Am I right? That means you say it is for 4 days. You can set expiry enough for 4 days, but it is not mandatory that it will stay for 4 days. I can clean the cookies in between anyway. But application states are predictable. That means what is the stage from start to end? From application start to application end. Thus will be maintained. That means a predictable state container, actually a predictable state container, predictable, right? So a predictable state container, what it can do? A predictable state container allows to manage your data from application start. Understood? Application start to application end. So, and another important, it is across all components within the scope of application. It in the scope of application across all components within the scope of application. That's what actually application, right? That means it is a predictable state container because we know exactly that it will start on application start and it will end on application end. That is what actually. That means already you see, that means applications behave consistently. Consistently means we exactly know where to start, where to end. And very important, centralized. Already we just discussed that. That means you can keep your data at one place so that we can access and use from any location. And these are debuggable, flexible are the features. Debuggable means easy to identify the bugs, fix the bugs. It is one of the feature of this Redux. It is flexible. That means without any UI layer, so and large ecosystem of add-ons, so it can work. That means without UI layer, it can work. Without UI layer means it can keep the data and it can manage the data at application and make this data available to the UI whenever required. Without UI also, it can work. But actually this, you saw input hidden. It is the state which is managed at which level? UI level, right? Input hidden means where it is managed, that state is managed in the UI level. Where cookies are managed, both at UI level in the browser, they are managed in the hard drive persistent, right? That depends on where they can be managed. That is just a feature, how they define about this. Now we have to implement this in our application. That means for that we need to understand the architecture behind this Redux. That means how Redux will store the data, how it will provide the data across the components, right? That we'll see next session tomorrow. Tomorrow we will do the practical work. Today I just given you theoretical overview about why we need Redux. I hope you got a clarity, right? Because many people just know Redux as to store data, but at which level, where to store data, why we need Redux, is it mandatory? These all things are important to understand. Right now we will see the architecture behind this and we will implement in one simple example. Then you can get a clarity that we will see. We can finish that in the tomorrow session. We will create a simple example of Redux. You can implement it. Tomorrow we will see, right? Then we can go with deployment, debugging, testing, how they work. Tomorrow we'll continue. Mostly by this weekend we will finish, right? By this weekend we will finish all our React concept. Tomorrow we will continue.